It is back to work for Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese after a stunning election victory over the weekend. Joining us now from Sydney, Professor Tim Harcourt from UTS and the airport economist. Channel right here on Ticker. Great to see you. Big weekend, big result. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, extraordinary. I mean, Anthony Albanese is now really the last Prime Minister since Bob Hawke, a Labor Prime Minister, to win a second term. And with an increased majority, that's something that's really not been done before. Even John Curtin back in 1943 won a huge majority, but he didn't win the first election like Albanese did. So he's really cemented his place in history as a big election vote winner for the Labor Party.
There has been a lot of dissecting since the election victory as to what happened to the Liberal Party. We'll talk about that as well. But now we know that he's calling MPs, the Prime Minister's calling his MPs back to Canberra, working out the Cabinet. We're told that it's going to be quite similar to what the Cabinet was leading up to the election and on with the job. What do you think the task is ahead now for Anthony Albanese? What does a second term look like?
Well, I think the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, started talking about productivity yesterday on the ABC on Insiders. Now, that's a good sign because ultimately the only way to improve living standards is through improved productivity. That was a word not even barely mentioned in the first 3 years of the Albanese government, when they won a slight victory over Scott Morrison, a very unpopular Prime Minister. Now they've got really their own mandate, and they can really venture out and be very bold on a number of international domestic economic issues, and they don't have to worry about governing with the Greens or the Teals or the Independents or anyone else. They can do it themselves.
Well, just on that, let's have a look at the state of play at the moment. So this is the House of Representatives, a sea of red there on the right-hand side and the government side of the chamber. The Liberals down to, at the moment, under 40 seats. It is expected it will go just over 40, but we're talking a historic low for the Liberals, and it'll really also change the way the coalition is made up in terms of that ministry, the shadow ministry, won't it? Because the Nats, well, they didn't lose a seat compared to the coalition or the Liberals, their coalition partner, the Liberals, who really suffered and even lost their leader.
No, that's right. I mean, the Conservative vote held up in rural Australia. The Nationals did okay, but it's their principally urban parties, the Liberal Party, who got really hurt badly, not just in the inner city, but in the outer suburbs of Melbourne and Sydney and the other capital cities, where they're hoping to do a lot better. So that's quite extraordinary for them. Clearly they're going to have to do some really serious analysis of this result to see where they went wrong. It seems they went wrong on almost every front.
What I find interesting is that while there was a shift towards Labor and a massive shift towards Labor, there wasn't a shift to the Greens. What do you think has happened there? Because they're struggling to get one seat in the chamber, and Adam Bandt, as we know, is in trouble in Melbourne.
Yeah, that was the extraordinary thing of the election night, was not only the rejection of the Liberal Party and the coalition, but the rejection of the hard left Greens. They said this election is about Gaza, and they had, vote for Palestine banners everywhere. And clearly, we live in Australia, and they hardly mentioned the environment or trees at all. And I think a lot of people, as they did in various local elections and by-elections, just saw the Greens as a hard left fringe with very strange views out of the Australian mainstream and indeed out of the Western democratic mainstream, and they had no reason to vote for them, and the Greens went backwards everywhere, and I think in some ways that will really help Labor going forward, because they don't have to pander to the Green votes like they thought they had to in the past. They can govern in their own right.
Yes, well, we all think about what happened to Julia Gillard when she had to govern with the help of the Greens, obviously, and brought in the carbon tax, which she'd gone to an election saying that there'll be no carbon tax under my government. That then led to a tumultuous 3-year period that then brought Tony Abbott in. That won't be the case this time around, obviously, because it looks as if Labor will also hold the Senate, meaning that it's really free rein for Labor.
No, that's right, and it didn't matter what Labor did, whether it be the carbon tax or housing, whatever they did, it wasn't good enough for the Greens, and the Greens would outflank them and often vote with the coalition instead of voting for a Labor government policy. And also, I've got to say, Aaron, the anti-Semitism of the Greens really hurt them. You saw in McNamara, Josh Burns, the Labor candidate, who happens to be Jewish, doing very well, and you saw the Labor Party doing a lot better than expected. And I think the Greens have really got to take a good hard look at some of their views on the Jewish community, because that was quite noticeable in the seats with large Jewish populations. The Greens have really tanked, and tanked elsewhere because many people in the community didn't like the anti-Semitism.
Yeah, you'd have to wonder if Adam Ban survives this. I mean, they probably won't have a choice. There's not really many Greens to be able to choose from to be leader of the party. But obviously he's taken it in a direction that every weekend in Melbourne there's been a pro-Palestine protest that's been happening. But the Greens, the party of Bob Brown, was a party of save the trees and stop deforestation. And given that nuclear was a huge topic, and we know the Greens' views on nuclear, it's surprising that they decided to go for pro-Palestine and not anti-nuclear against the Liberal Party and set themselves up as an alternative to the Liberal Party. It seems that they have found themselves irrelevant in the election campaign and irrelevant to a lot of Australians.
No, they have. They went for very, very unusual issues that I couldn't see how they're going to make any ground, and they just alienated a lot of people, particularly the Jewish community and elsewhere. And you're totally right. I mean, we've got issues with renewables. The Dutton party the opposition put up a nuclear proposal, and the Greens were nowhere to be seen. They really could have, helped explain to the electorate the importance of, tackling climate change and renewables and so on, and been a bit more constructive with the Labor Party, which is obviously, the Labor Party is obviously trying to do something on climate change and energy policy. And, the Greens sort of went missing because they were off protesting for Palestine.
All right, time we talk about the Liberals now, because what a catastrophe for Peter Dutton, but also for the party. And I mean, we could probably spend hours talking about this. It's nothing new. Great article in the Financial Review talking about how they've lost any relevancy. They don't know who they are anymore. They've forgotten about professionals. They've certainly forgotten about women, or at least women have forgotten about them. The Teals have taken over for female, I guess, centre rights. I sent this article to my father last night, who said, yep, I read the same article 30 years ago. Is the issue for the Liberal Party that they just simply wait for Labor to stuff it up, and then they come back in, they go really hard, really sharp, as we saw with Tony Abbott? And since Abbott's victory there, was it 2013, they've lost 50 seats in a 150-seat parliament. Do the Liberals need to take a good hard look at themselves? And I guess the bigger question, will they?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, they've really lost young voters who voted overwhelmingly for Labor. And this is young people worried about housing and worried about living standards and basic economic reasons. They didn't appeal to young people at all. They probably lost that vote for a very long time. And you make an interesting point about women representation. I mean, Labor, under some criticism, went for the affirmative action rules about 30 years ago in the 90s, and got a lot of women in Parliament and in Cabinet. And now, have some very successful appealing candidates. So, in Queensland, for instance, a lot of women will be entering Parliament for the first time for the Labor Party, and the Liberal Party didn't do too much. And as a result, the Teals, won these seats, with a lot of help, obviously, from Simon Holmes at Court. But you would have thought in another universe, those Teals, Allegra Spender and so on, would have probably been, Conservative or Liberal Party cabinet ministers in an alternative world. So, in a sense, they went backwards because the Teals are sort of the smaller Liberal branch of what Menzies put together when he put together the Liberal Party. He called it the Liberal Party, not the Conservative Party, deliberately, because he saw it as a broad coalition of various interests on the non-Labor side. So they're probably due for another, re-engineering makeover like they did in the 1940s after John Curtin and Ben Chifley really thrashed them pretty badly in 43 and 46.
Yes, well, Peter Dutton didn't just lose the chance to form a government, he also lost his seat after, what was it, 27 or so years in Parliament. It all came down to a 2-hour period and out he went. He gave a very gracious concession speech, I thought. The view from everyone that was watching with me was, where's this guy been? Let's take a look at some of what he had to say as he took to the stage at the W Hotel in Brisbane.
Earlier on, I called the Prime Minister to congratulate him on his success tonight. It's an historic occasion for the Labor Party and we recognise that. I congratulated the Prime Minister and wished he and Jodie and Nathan all the very best. And I said to the Prime Minister that his mum would be incredibly proud of his achievement tonight, and he should be very proud of what he's achieved. Thank you.
All right, there you go. And lovely way to finish it off with him as well. Who should take the reins of the Liberal Party? There's been a lot of talk about Andrew Hastie, who we know has some pretty, I don't know if they're extreme views, but they're views that may find it troubling in a mainstream environment. I remember interviewing him in a previous role where during the same-sex marriage, and he was very much on the opposing side, as well as obviously his views on women in the special forces, which makes it difficult when your problem is women in the party. Whether or not he makes sense about these things, I might add, it still could be a bit of a challenge. Then obviously there's Angus Taylor, who everyone's pointed the finger at as the Shadow Treasurer, saying, where were your policies? Where were your tax policies? What on earth was going on with you as well? What are your views? What's the right type of person, and who could be the right type of person to take the mantle up from Peter Dutton? Because it feels like whoever does probably won't ever be Prime Minister.
Yeah, I might say that was a gracious concession speech by Peter Dutton, and he also said some very kind things about his Labor opponent in Dixon, Ali France, who of course lost her son to leukaemia, and he said her son would have been very proud of her. So I think he was at his best on Saturday night. Well, the Liberals have got to now turn to a number of candidates. There's talk of Andrew Hastie from Western Australia, the Defence spokesman. There's talk of Dan Tehan, the member for Wannon. Angus Taylor didn't perform very well as Shadow Treasurer. He may be taking some of the blame for the very bad campaign. And then there's Susan Lee as a possible candidate. It's very hard when you lose so badly, but you know, someone's got to basically take the baton and take it on. And occasionally you can be surprised and be quite effective as opposition and get back in one term, but certainly there's a lot of soul searching for the Conservative side of politics, balancing all these issues and thinking about you know, what's the sort of issues that are going to be important to Australians in 2028.
Well, leaders have been quick to react. We've seen Emmanuel Macron, of course. We've seen the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who many have said that this election has followed exactly the same path and that Trump has been a big factor in this. One of the other things has been trade too. Let's have a listen to Jim Chalmers, who spoke on the ABC's Insiders program about that.
Look, obviously the immediate focus is on this global economic uncertainty, particularly the US and China part of that and what it means for us. And so I was able to be briefed on that, what's happening in markets and what it means for the Australian economy. So clearly that's the immediate focus. And again, you know, I think one of the reasons why we got this big majority last night is because people recognised that if you wanted stability while the global economy was going crazy, then a majority Labor government was the best way to deliver that.
Earlier on, I called the Prime Minister.
So I'll just interrupt Peter Dutton there. We've heard that one. What are your thoughts on Jim Chalmers there? What are your thoughts on trade? And what do you think that, as Treasurer, that Jim Chalmers should be trying to enact? Because if you think about the Hawke-Keating era, I know you and I have spoken about it before, it was a reformist era floating the Australian dollar, made a lot of changes. It had the recession, of course, which wasn't great, but certainly it's remembered as a centre-right Labor Party. Do you think that that's what we'll see for the next 3 or 6 years?
Yeah, of course, Jim Chalmers wrote his PhD on Paul Keating, so there's no one who knows more about Paul Keating than Jim Chalmers. But yeah, look, there is this opportunity now. I mean, particularly if you think about trade, Aaron, you know, Anthony Albanese has won without having to, you know, worry about Trump breathing down his neck before an election. And also he's won having stared down China with the tariffs that they put on Australia. So given that we now can stand on our own 2 feet, withstanding China and the Trump effect, as Mark Carney did. We now can basically, perform our own, develop our own international foreign policy and trade policy with a huge mandate. And that means, we can do more with India, we can do more with ASEAN, we can do more with the Europeans. Significant that President Macron congratulated Anthony Albanese. There is now an opportunity to reshape Australia's place in the world, and also, as we said earlier, we can now bring productivity and improving living standards back into the picture. There's a real opportunity now, and we don't have to worry about tariffs because Donald Trump has tried tariffs and failed. China has tried tariffs and failed. We now can look at our own approach to industry policy and innovation without pressure to put up tariffs from the left of the Labor Party or anyone else, because they're clearly not working for Donald Trump and Xi Jinping.
Yeah, will be interesting to watch, and look forward to your comments as well. As always, Professor Tim Harcourt there from UTS, host of the Airport Economist channel right here on Ticker. You can check it out now by downloading the app. We'll see you soon, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.